Aloha, good morning to all of our colleagues across Southeast Asia, and good afternoon to people here in Honolulu, and good evening for people on the mainland. It is our pleasure to kick off this fall 2024 semester of Loose Southeast Asia Transitions webinars with this beautiful webinar entitled Southeast Asia Nation Building, Navigating the Dynamics of Resilience and Change in Southeast Asia. We're very proud to have so many great colleagues with us today and a wonderful moderator, Dr. Ehito Kimura, who is an associate professor here at political science at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm Miriam Stark, and my job is just to welcome you, and so I do. And I turn it over now to Dr. Ehito Kimura, who will moderate the session. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Miriam, for introducing me and also being our fearless leader here at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. My name is Ehito Kimura. I'm a faculty member here at the University of Hawaii at the Department of Political Science. I'm also a member of the Executive Committee for the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, and I'm very honored to be a moderator today for the webinar on Southeast Asian nation building. Just before we get started, I just want to say this webinar series is going to be a kickoff for other talks upcoming. We're going to have talks on and panels on labor relations in Southeast Asia, urbanization in the region, climate change and migration, among others. And you can find all of this information about these and other events at the UH Manoa Center for Southeast Asian Studies website. And we can also find past videos. And actually, today's event will be also on the Center YouTube channel. I also want to thank Michigan State University and their Center for Southeast Asian Studies for being co-organizers and co-hosts for this LuceSEA webinar series. So today we're talking about nation building in Southeast Asia. And I think the study of nationalism has really been central in Southeast Asian studies, but also central in scholarship across the academy in history and political science, in anthropology, and all of these areas. And they raise fundamental questions about state power, about identity, about marginality, and about the politics of belonging. We have really three distinguished panelists who I am thrilled to introduce. Dr. Thongchai Winichakul is Emeritus Professor of History at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a Research Fellow Emeritus at the Institute of Developing Economies, IDE JETRO, in Japan, and currently a visiting professor at the Pridi Banomyong International College at Thammasat University. His book, Siam Mapped, published by the University of Hawaii Press, was awarded the Harry J. Benda Prize from the Association of Asian Studies, the Grand Prize from the Asian Affairs Research Council, and has been translated into Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and Thai. His latest book, Moments of Silence, The Unforgetting of the October 6, 1976 Massacre in Bangkok, also published from UH Press in 2020, was awarded the Humanities Book Prize by the European Association for Southeast Asian Studies in 2022. He's also a recipient of the Guggenheim Award, was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2003. He was the president of the Asian Association of Asian Studies from 2013 to 2014. And his research interests are really about the intellectual foundations of modern Siam under colonial conditions, including modern geography and sovereignty, historical ideology, and the legal system. He's published 8 books and several articles also in Thai, and is a well-known commentator and critic of Thai political and social issues. So welcome, Achan Thongchai. Dr. Mubah Ahmad Safril is an assistant professor at the Department of International Relations and research fellow at the Center for Strategic and Global Studies at the Universitas Airlangga in Surabaya, Indonesia. He earned his doctorate at the Asia-Pacific Studies at the National Chengchi University in Taipei, in Taiwan. And his research interests are include sort of Indonesia and Taiwan relations, Indonesia-US-China relations, and the China-US rivalry in the Indo-Pacific, and also looking at China's soft power and cultural diplomacy in Southeast Asia. So welcome, Dr. Safril. And then our final speaker and panelist is Dr. Ken Swan Kai. He is head of the Mekong program at the Asian Research Center for International Development and also lecturer at the School of Social Innovation at Mai Fa Luang University. He's published research articles and given presentations around issues of natural resource and indigenous peoples' rights. And he's written opinion pieces for media in Myanmar. He holds a Ph.D. in international development and cooperation from Hiroshima University in Japan, an MA in public administration from Mai Fa Luang University in Thailand, and also an MA in international development from Chulalongkorn University. And he was supported by the Heinrich Böll Stiftung Southeast Asia Scholarship Program. So I'm going to give each speaker today about 15 to 20 minutes or so to share with us their thoughts. And then with the remaining time we have left, I want to gather and sort of promote any questions that we might have for discussion. And we'll go in sort of the order of the flyer. So we'll start with Achan Thongchai and then move to Achan Safril and then go on to Dr. Kai. So with that, Achan Thongchai, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. To save time, I'd like to jump into the subject. But as the first speaker, let me lay out the big picture backgrounds of Southeast Asia in a broad stroke, put it that way. There are a few points to start with to talk about nation building in Southeast Asia. I think most nations in Southeast Asia have similar objectives. First of all, to consolidate, to integrate into one country, although different degrees, different characteristics of unification. I mean, different countries have different idea. What does it mean to be unified as a nation? Degrees and characteristics. Second point on this section on, background, the different characteristics of unification usually involve to overcome a number of problems, but the source of problems that become obstacles for nation building are mainly two types. In detail, we figure it out. I just give you a kind of a broad idea. One is the legacies of pre-colonial states. And the second one, the legacies of colonization. How the country was or had been in a pre-modern time before trying to consolidate, try to integrate. That's a factor. And then how colonization took place in each nation that also left legacies for nation building to the post-colonial era. Direct colonialism, Indonesia, Vietnam, a little bit, not quite, a kind of marginal or more remote, like Cambodia, Laos, and outlying area of Indonesia, or really indirect or even non-formal, informal colonization, or we might say not colonized, like Siam, different. The legacies of the pre-modern states, such as the relative powers of many ethnic groups, or the more unified, more homogeneous, less fragmented, less rivalry, those are the factors. The third one, for a broad stroke of the general background of nation building Southeast Asia, I think, is ideology. How ideology that support the mechanism of such imagined community play into the nation building, that's important too. Now, no matter how they try to consolidate, to try to integrate, it means that the inclusion always generates the exclusion. Marginalization of the unified entity called such and such nation always happen. There was a time, maybe when I was young, when I was a student, we often learn how a country is unified without talking about how certain parts, certain people are marginalized. But the past 40, 50 years, I think marginalization and and the resistance to the attempt to consolidate, to integrate the nation has been a subject of a lot of people's attention. So now we realize that every inclusion generates exclusion. The final point is for the background is that the approach, the actions, how they do consolidation, how they did integration affect the outcome very much. For example, violent or not. Negotiation or more like suppression, violent suppression, the way they try to integrate or the way they try the how to say the centralized countries try to deal with the periphery, deal with the marginal part. Those are very much affect nation building in the long term. Now, let me skip from that point. I'm going to talk about Thailand. I think main task of each speaker is to talk about the country. The tool to create a unified national identity in Thailand is mainly the following. The first one, the creation of the centralized and integrated state. Powerful centralized administration from the start. Of course, it's up and down, but mainly the idea from the start is try to centralize, try to have the central administration strong and powerful relative to the regional and relative to the local from the start. Try to make the rest of the country dependent on the center, mainly by 2 or 3 things, such as taxation system, salary system, the way to control budget for local rules. Early on, local rules have some more independence, so they control the way to distribute the resource and budget to have power over the local people, local rulers. Later, when they have technology to consolidate, to integrate further, then they reduce the autonomy of the regions to become even more centralized than before. Until recently, maybe the past few decades, the talk about decentralization in Thailand just re-emerged again. But let's say for a long time, more than half a century, the country has been very, very highly centralized. And the third one, apart from tax, salary, budget, apart from resources, is centralized military. The second tool that people who study nation building in Thailand hasn't talked much, but I think it's important, is the process. Political scientists, at least I learned from Ben Anderson on this point in his book, Imagine Community, the mechanism called Russification. Thailand is a country where the ruling elite in Bangkok try to, let's say, Russification is termed, the name suggests already, the way to force people in different regions of the former, the Imperial Russia, the outlying region under the power of Imperial Russia, try to turn them to speak Russian. This is it. The national Thai language, in fact, is a local dialect for a long, long time. By the time Bangkok became the capital, the population that speaks the national Thai language today is still small. The process that try to force and convince, negotiate, whatever, to try to make people speak Central Thai or Bangkok Thai. I shouldn't say even Central Thai because in the center there are many dialects, but Bangkok Thai is very specific. It's a lot of mixed with Chinese, Teochew Chinese accent. The process started in 1885 and continued on even after absolute monarchy until about 1940, 1950s. Mainly through education, but also by other means as well. The Russification not only about language, it's about religion, trying to make other parts of whose Buddhism is more like a localized, try to spread or try to force and to convince them to adopt a similar type of Buddhism, similar practices of Buddhism that control administered by by the central administration of the Sangha of the Buddhist order from Bangkok. So Lucification is very important process. It's peaceful, it's violent in itself. Depends on how you define peace or violence. The third tool involved in the Thai nation building is ideology. Royalism, nationalism, so strong in Thailand. The belief in the unified oneness of the country is so strong. Most other countries in Southeast Asia maybe not that strong. In Thailand, is very strong. Has to be. That's what I mean. Different degree, different characteristic of unification. In Thailand, almost advocate the sameness until recently. The advocacy of sameness by the state has been strong for so many decades, for the most part of the 20th century. Put that way. So ideology play a very important part. And as you see today too, royalism, the significance of royalism to the nation, come back. It sounds like a new thing. In fact, looking in broad perspective, it has been strong like that since absolute monarchy. It was not as strong, only briefly, about 3 or 4 decades in the past 100 years. Otherwise, Thai nation and royalism are almost identical. Now, the way Thai state did the first 3, 4 things, mainly by, peaceful, there's no battle, there's no fighting. So strong battle suppression in order to integrate those marginal or outlying parts, mainly force them to do, convince them to do, or by both stick and carrot, put it that way. So most of the time is peaceful, and but not as peaceful as the conventional history try to present, including suppression of resistance that I'm going to mention, such as local and regional rebellions. Because throughout that process of centralization, as I say, inclusion generates exclusion unavoidably. In conventional history, we usually read that Thailand transition into modern nation building is peaceful because, relatively speaking, ethnicity, language, and blah, 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 are more unified than other countries. I would say, again, as I said previously, Lucification important. If you follow linguists who study Thailand, William Smalley would suggest that no, there's no single language of Thai. There are plenty of languages of Thai family, Thai language family. But Thai, I would say Thai people in general can speak Central Thai only in the past generation. Not even the generation before me. Local dialect still strong. Only become more fluent in the Central Thai about the past generation, only my generation and after. Because marginalization created and reproduced by the center exclude a lot of the others within. First, they claim that Bangkok is more civilized, other more backward, more underdeveloped. And whenever there was a threat, Bangkok suppressed them violently, such as rebellion in 1902, both in the north, northeast, and in the south. In the same year, around the same time, beginning and towards the end of the year, there were big rebellions in each. They are not coordinated. It just happens. It's accidental. It took place in the same year. They are not coordinated. The cause and the characteristic of the rebellions in the 3 places are quite different. But Bangkok suppressed them quite brutally too. So I think that's all I would leave at that point. Let other people, and then if there is any question about let's say, how about the nation building in recent time? I would say, in general, as the end of my turn, is that those kind of russification goes on and on until late 20th century. Suppression of minor resistance goes on and on and on, maybe until today, but mostly minor. Centralization in Thailand is still very strong, only a bit relaxed in the past few decades, maybe not more than 4 decades. So let's say a similar process is going on, but maybe change in character, change in degree, even in the same country. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chan, Thongchai. Perfect timing as well. So we're right on track. I want to give the floor next to Dr. Safril. Please go ahead and share your comments.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Kimura. Please let me start with the presentation, and I will show you. Okay. Selamat pagi from Indonesia and good afternoon in Hawaii, I think. Thank you very much for having me here in this webinar. It is my honor to speak at the CSGS University of Hawaii webinar. And my name is Ahmad Safril Mubah. I'm research fellow at Center for Strategic and Global Studies and also assistant professor in IR department in Airlangga University. And basically, my background is international relations, and I'm focusing on the relationship between Indonesia and China, and also specifically would like to highlight the Chinese investment as a Chinese cultural diplomacy in Indonesia, including how China use ethnic Chinese Indonesia to promote its cultural diplomacy. That's why I want to focus more on the how Chinese Indonesia in Indonesian post-colonial nation building, because this is very important to examine this issue regarding the fact that actually Chinese Indonesia is the one of the minority group in Indonesia. However, the Chinese Indonesia has a constructive role in nation building, not only in post-colonial, but also in the colonial period. Because if we compare between the colonial period and post-colonial period, basically Chinese diaspora already emigrated in Indonesia long time ago. And this is my, this is the structure of my presentation. I would like to introduce the migration of Chinese diaspora and then move to how we make differentiate between nationality and citizenship, and then dilemma of Chinese Indonesia. And there is also the fact that after the New Order period, there is no discrimination in law for Chinese Indonesian, and there is also recognition of Chinese culture and how the Chinese Indonesian make a cultural hybridization. And however, there are still negative political sentiment until now regarding the Chinese Indonesian political role in national building. So I think this is very important to show you about the migration of Chinese diaspora, because actually, if we talk about the migration of the any Chinese overseas, Southeast Asia is one of the top destination of any Chinese in the past. And most of the Chinese Indonesians are coming from Fujian province. And if we talk about the composition, I think Thailand is the home of the most overseas Chinese in the world, and Indonesia, I think, the third or fourth country. And if we talk about the diaspora, I will always compare and so connect it the globalization, because in my background, we believe that globalization have the tremendous effect to immigration. And globalization, we can say this is referred to people, the movement of people across the region. And the migration of Chinese diaspora is actually was caused by the globalization in the past, because of course there was the situation in the past that endorsed and also that encouraged the Chinese Chinese in mainland China to move to other countries, including in Indonesia. And for Chinese diaspora, this is very important also because in the past, when they move to other country, other region in Indonesia, so they basically moved to the Batavia in the past, and now it's Jakarta. There were more Chinese population in Batavia, and because Batavia is one of the center of struggle for independence in Indonesia, so some of them are involved in the Indonesian struggle for independence. And however, there is also issue regarding how they can um, how they can move to the how in between nationality or citizenship, because actually Chinese diaspora identify themselves as the highway warrant Chinese abroad and were oriented towards socialization with the home country. Even though Chinese Indonesia are already living in the Indonesia, but there is still social connection and also emotional connection with their homeland. And this is become the issue in Indonesia in the past because regarding the 1965 coup of the Indonesian Communist Party, the government always related to the endorsement from the PRC government. And most of the issue related to Chinese at the time always banned by the Indonesian government in suatu era. And also because of affected by the globalization, Chinese diaspora actually tends to stress their nationality rather than their ethnic status. So it is actually there is confusion regarding the how to prefer nationality or citizenship. If we talk about nationality, of course, this is kind of social term, but for the citizenship, this is a law term. If we have the citizenship, we must have a passport and national identity card. But regarding the nationality, we don't have any legal document. So Chinese Indonesia can say that they are Chinese nation, but they also can say, but they are Indonesia citizen. So this is also become the dilemma for them to make a loyal between how they can loyal to Indonesian government regarding the situation at the time that the new order government banned many activities of Chinese Indonesia at the time, and that's why they introduce their movement by joining the social organization, and also because of the government pushed them to change their Chinese name to Indonesian sounding name. So this is also become the issue for the Chinese Indonesia at the time. So therefore, we can also say that how they can make adaptation for contributing in Indonesian post-colonial nation building. It's not easy for them. It's not easy for Chinese Indonesian because they must be make a connection with the major ethnic group in Indonesia. And then also, as I mentioned before, this is become the dilemma for Chinese Indonesian regarding the new order regulation, and also because Suharto government at the time bridged the Indonesia and PRC relation from 1976 to 1990. So everything related to China could be sensitive issue. This is the impact of the government accusation of PRC involvement in the communist coup in 1966. And that's why, because of the accusation, then the new order government introduced assimilation policy, such as public display of Chinese were banned at the time, and then Chinese Indonesian identities were hidden. Chinese Indonesian didn't have any Chinese identity in their national identity card or their passport, and also Chinese Indonesian should abandon Chinese cultural background. That's why there was no introduction of Chinese cultural show, Chinese cultural performance, and also there is no promotion of Chinese culture at the time. And however, actually, they have contributed to Indonesian economic development. This is the fact that most of the Chinese Indonesian in Indonesia are working in the economic sector, in business sector, and they contribute to economic development. And they have so many companies in Indonesia, and of course, this then became the prejudice from the local people, from the local any group, because of the this is a very sensitive issue. So there was also sentiment regarding how the Chinese Indonesian have the power, have the economic power in Indonesia. And most of Chinese diaspora actually identify themselves as Indonesian, although they are still having the connection, social connection, emotional connection with mainland China. After the New Order period, the new government by President Habibie then abolished pribumi and non-pribumi division. So before the Reformation era in the New Order government, there is differentiation between Chinese Indonesian and other such so-called Indonesian people. So so-called Indonesian people called as pribumi and the other as called as non-pribumi. So the government then abolished the assimilation law, and then during the Abdurrahman Wahid period, also repeal law number 14 1976, which prohibit Chinese religious practice and cultural performance. So starting from the Abdurrahman Wahid era, there are more introduction of the Chinese cultural show in many public spaces. And also Chinese New Year became the become the public holiday in Indonesia. And during the Yudhoyono period, also recognized natural-born Chinese Indonesian as indigenous people. This is very important because in the past they are not recognized as indigenous people. They are only recognized as the non-pribumi people. And also after that, there is also recognition of Chinese culture. So after the introduction of the regulation by Gus Dur, the Chinese culture activities are welcome and publicly displayed. So for example, in the Chinese New Year holiday, there are so many Chinese culture performance in public spaces. And this is also happen not only in particular city in Indonesia, but also in many cities in Indonesia. And Chinese New Year is now a public holiday and publicly celebrated. And then also study of Mandarin has become popular. So there are more Mandarin courses in many university and many schools. And this is important also because the people in Indonesia, because the Chinese investment is very popular, and there is also a need from the Chinese company to have the local workers that fluent in Chinese and in Mandarin language. So regarding the interest of PRC government, also this is the basic government also promote the study of Mandarin in many university and schools, and also and in Jokowi era the relationship between Indonesia and China are growing, and also there is a increasing relation in economic, in political, and also in social relation between the two countries. So this is also support the introduction of Chinese culture, and this then are used by the Chinese Indonesia to get involved more in national building, and then they nominate themselves to become candidate in legislative and executive election. However, of course, there are still uh, anti-China sentiment in Indonesia regarding the candidate in political contest, and also there is cultural hybridization this is very important regarding the situation that's because of the different culture between Chinese culture and also Indonesian local culture. So there are more hybridization. For example, Chinese speak a type of hybrid language. So Chinese and Bahasa Melayu combination as a result of Hokkien and Malay mixing. And Chinese diaspora speak Indonesian rather than Chinese in their daily language. So if you come to visit many city in Indonesia and meet Chinese Indonesia in the local area, you can see that Chinese Indonesia actually speak Bahasa Indonesia, not speak Chinese. And if you compare to other countries, this is very different. For example, if we visit Malaysia, there are still Chinese in Malaysia speak in Chinese language, but in Indonesia, most Chinese Indonesia speak in Bahasa Indonesia. And Hokkien words have become an integral part of Bahasa Indonesia. There is similarity, teh or tea, kue and cakes, and tahu as a tofu, and soto as a meat soup. This is coming from the Chinese language. So the last but not least, the Chinese lion dance, Barongsai, is highly accepted in Indonesia. There is a cultural performance of Chinese lion dance in many public events, in particularly in Chinese New Year holiday. And however, there is still political sentiment. There is still prejudice regarding the position of Chinese Indonesia. For example, survey from ISIS Yusuf Ishak Institute in 2017, Chinese only care about their own kind. There is a perception from people in Indonesia, and there is also prejudice may still harbor loyalty towards China and have too much influence in Indonesian economic, and also resistance from certain groups when Basuki Cahayapurnama, a Chinese, ran for Jakarta's gubernatorial election in 2017. And the last survey conducted by ASIS, there is 57.8% Indonesian participants express distrust in China. So if we compare between the elite interest and also the majority people of Indonesia, there is a gap between them, because actually for political elite, it's they tend to move to China, but in the grassroots there is still prejudice and also political and anti-China sentiment towards the Chinese, anti-Chinese. And the last I want to conclude. So actually there is a dilemma between national identity and citizenship in the process of Indonesian national building. And Chinese Indonesians respond the dilemma by mixing Chinese culture and Indonesian local culture to shape hybrid identities. And the last, Chinese Indonesian apply the cultural hybridization approach to be recognized as Indonesian citizen while remaining embrace Chinese culture. That's all. Thank you very much. And I give to Professor Kimbora. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that discussion. I thought it was really helpful to see if Thongchai focused on real estate power and state side, you were looking more at the societal side in some ways. And so I hope we have some fertilization of that discussion as well. So our next speaker will be Dr. Ten Swan Kai, and the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thanks for having me today, University of Hawaii, Manao, especially to the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. So I will jump directly into the case of Burma, Myanmar, since Ajahn Thongchai and, Professor Sarif have mentioned a lot about the foundation of nation buildings. To be very general, or to be just introduce the nation building in Burma. It is a very complex and even often contentious process because it's deeply intertwined between the country's history back in the pre and post colonial period, the ethnic diversity, and also about the multi-religious landscapes. So the failure to effectively implement what we call state building strategies is a significant factor contributing to these 6-7 years long conflicts in Burma, Myanmar. This failure itself is rooted in many factors, historical factors, even contemporary dynamics, including the mismanagement of the country by those who should not be in the position of leading the country. And also it includes the legacy of colonialism. How have the divide and rule system of the British colony has great impact on the country, and also about the use of religion as a unifying factors or force, and the very divisive impact of religious nationalism. I would even call it ultra-nationalism or religious nationalism on different ethnic groups. Because before the 1945, the contemporary Burma was, a very diverse communities, imagined communities living in, the Thai and Siam, the Thai part, the India-Bangladesh part, and even to the Chinese part. So when the British employ a divide and rule strategy that exacerbated ethnic tensions. So by favoring, first speaking about the legacy of the colonialism, by favoring certain ethnic group over the others, the colonial administration have planted the seed of discord that persists today, I would call it, because they come together with the 3M approach, marketing and military and even missionaries. So especially when the missionaries come, it seems, I would call it seems because this is not academic argument. It seems it was very difficult to evangelize or convert the very deep-rooted Buddhist community. So they came up to the hills or the ethnic area, and which create till now the majority of the ethnic nationalities, such as the Chin, the Kachin, become a Christian, and Christianity itself become one of the identity. And this approach not only depend the division or the divide between ethnic groups, but also weaken the foundation of cohesive national identity, making the post-independence nation building formidable challenge. One of, in my opinion, I would say in my opinion, one of the most significant aspects of nation building in Burma has been also the use of religion to unify the country. Even though we are talking about the nation buildings in post-colonial period, I want to bring you back to the history back in the 11th century when the King Anorata introduced Theravada Buddhism to consolidate the power and unify the nation against the internal or external threats, such as the power of Aris, the group of enemies monk or priest. So he brought the Shin Anorata, the monk Anorata from the Mon state to unify the country. So using Buddhism to unify a country. And in modern time, the contemporary Burma and Myanmar, the two most powerful institutions, I would call the military or the Tatmato and the Buddhist Monk Association. They have been applying these very deep and long-rooted ideologies of using Buddhism to unify a country and to make it the national identity of the nation. So this become a big problem because Myanmar is composed of diverse religious groups, multi-ethnic groups, those who possess different religious background, Christianity, Buddhism, in the West, Buddhism and Muslim, Islam. So when these two, I would say these two institutions has further entrenched Buddhism as the cornerstone for Burmese national identity, it become discrimination in disguise of promotion and propagation of national identity. So on the other hand, I want to also mention about whether religion can really unify Burma, Myanmar. The answer simply is no. Buddhism cannot unite us. How about Christianity among the ethnic groups? For example, the Chin ethnic nationalities. Yes, the majority of the population in some example like Chin ethnic nationalities, Christianity become the identity of Chin, but the different Christian denomination, the clash and the disagreement, I would just call it, is like one of the problem among the Kachin. The different Christian denomination have created significant discord among the Chin, the cracks and the division among the Baptists. The majority of the Christianity in Chin are Baptist. The division. I mean the problems with Zomi Baptist Convention or Chin Baptist Convention also was the problem back in 1945 when one of the biggest ethnic armed groups, the KNU. The split between the KNU back in 1945 also is because the clash between the Buddhist Korean and the Christian Korean back in Manipalo war. So to be very brief, I think religious nationalism itself is a problem, and this is the conundrum between religion and national identity. And I would also bring all the audience back to, what we call, the term is called Burmanization. During the colonial period, fighting against the colonizer, the national leaders call for, we are Burmese, so we speak Burmese language, and we are Burman. So the 3B is called Burmanization, and it helps for the unity of the Burmese people to ask for to demand for independence from the British. But in the post colonial period, the same I would call the second generation of Burmanization has been applying. So the majority Burmese people used to be a Burman. You have to be a Burman. You have to be a Burmese. You have to be a Buddhist. You have to speak Burmese. So this is one of the problem itself. The second generation of Burmanization also create big split between the multi-ethnic nationalities. So to come to part of the conclusion, when we talk about nation state, many scholars talk about common identity, living togetherness, or some other scholars also talk about nationalism or the products of industrialization, modernization. Some other scholars also mention about in nation state, it is important to, focus on the ethnic origin and ethnic core and even about the shared history. So in nation building strategy, generally speaking, I believe there are two strategies. The first approach is assimilation, and the second is integration. So the nation building's approach in Myanmar, Burma is tend more to the assimilation, promotion and propagation of Buddhism as the national identity is discrimination in disguise of development and promotion of a country. And we still have to work a lot on the part of integration if we want to develop the country into a modern, democratic or peaceful nations. And I want to bring one idea from Ajahn Thongchai in his book Siam Independence about the geobody. So the successive authoritarians in Burma have used this geobody, unifying all the different ethnic groups into one color or one ethnicity, which is called Burmese. So um, in the context of Burma, Myanmar, it is very much important to focus more on state building, which means providing or um, um, helping all the different ethnic groups come together and their voice being heard, and then so that the formidable challenge of nation building can be solved. And in my conclusion, my last conclusion, coming together after 1945, all the different ethnic groups come together to create Union of Burma. So in the context of Myanmar, national unification or national uniformity is not the answer, but we have to work together for the national unity. In maybe one of the solution can be consociationalism, coming together and matching all the different religious ideologies, national demands, and then compromising all our needs into one of how should we call the national identity. But I don't think bringing only one majority's identity as the national identity in Burma, Myanmar would always bring greater challenges and big problems in the days to come. And yeah, the problem the problem is calling for the sovereignty of a nation. I think the backbones of the country, like the law, the mother law, like in the constitution. At this moment, Buddhism is given a special position, but the other religious groups are just acknowledged, not even recognized. In the Constitution of 2008, it say we acknowledge this and this and these religious groups all also exist when we by the time we write this Constitution, but they give us a very special position to Buddhism. So Buddhism itself is a beautiful religion, but using or misusing religion as a tool to unify a nation in nation building is a problem. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. Very thoughtful remarks talking about, both that process of nation building and state formation from the state perspective, but then also talking about kind of the challenges behind that when you're using religion and ethnicity as the basis for that. So we already have a few questions, and I would encourage people now to kind of take a moment and maybe jot down any questions that you have and put them in the Q&A or in the chat. We have a number of questions for Professor Thongchai, but I think they are questions that can also be addressed by some of our other panelists. So I'm going to ask a few of these questions together and then kind of allow Thongchai and the other panelists to address them, if that sounds like a good process. So let me begin by noting one question here. Thongchai, what's the relationship between military forces in Thailand? What about the relationship between military forces in Thailand? Do you think the situation will likely to happen in the next decade? And what about the recent regime? So very broad-based questions, but maybe specifically about military and nation building. And that's something that maybe the other panelists can address as well. Another attendee says, what might be the most challenging barriers for us in nation building within our people and cultural contexts that are viewed in your academic perspective? And at this time of critical moment in Myanmar, in which areas and how can such bigger democratic nations like Japan and India help current Myanmar into new Myanmar as a nation near future in the post-coup period? So there's a few more, and I'll just let you sort of collect these, take these down. And again, any of the panelists can try to address these. Do you think rebellion in Thailand that you described are negative consequences of aggressive style of nation building in Southeast Asia? Nation building literature seems to only highlight the advantages of nation building. And then another person asks, and say, thank you for a great talk. You mentioned standard official Thai language is a pretty new invention. Could you please talk more about the state's effort or policy to reinforce this idea of national language? Is the state against Thai people using dialects? As a comparison, Singapore was extremely proactive in stopping people from speaking dialects in favor of a national language. So how is that in Thailand? And how is that in the other countries, in Myanmar, in Indonesia as well? So let's start with those, and then I think a few more questions have come in. So I'll continue to monitor the Q&A and chat. But Thongchai, would you like to start us off and address any of those questions and however you want?
Okay, thank you. I try to make it each one brief. The first one about military in nation building in Thailand. In my view, I know that this is maybe different from many others, especially among Thai scholars. I think military has been the backbone of nation building since either the absolute monarchy or during the Cold War, long after the absolute monarchy. I mean, the military and the monarchy can be in conflict for a while, such as two, 3 decades in the 1930s. But for the role of military in nation building, I think they are very important in both, I mean, in under absolute monarchy and long after and after that. Especially, they emphasize on being the same, being I call it Thainess, or if I use a similar word, I would call, I mean, in this case, not Burmanization, but Thaiization. In the Thai case, is also strong. Military role in this process may be not as that, I mean, in terms of Thaiization of language and culture on Buddhism. But as long as the sense of sameness in the country is strong, it builds up the sense of threat, the sense of security. That's how the military come in, to secure the Thainess, to secure the sameness, to secure in Thai language, we call this unity. It's not unity, it's try to force people to think the same, to believe in similar thing, to think in similar way. I would say this is the role of the military, try to make it a security issue. That's how Thai military becomes so, how to say, the role of military is so important because the concern for security is just too much. It's security paranoid. The result is that in Thailand, like many other countries, I mean, outsiders may not look at it in the same way as Thailand is a military state. There is a new book, 2 new books. One is by Paul Chambers, the other one by Dr. Phuongthong Phawakapan. I think Paul Chambers tried to explain how military roles throughout 100-something years since the late 19th century, since the beginning of the modern military, has been strong to the Thai state. For Dr. Phuongthong, the important point is that security paranoid and steadily powerful military makes the military infiltrate, that's her word, infiltrates in every facet of Thai society until now. I think that's it. I think it comes with the role of nation building. For the rebellion, the answer would be short. Yes, there are negative consequences of strong, centralized consolidation, integration of the country. But this reaction, the rebellion as reaction or resistance, is negative or positive also depends on your own perspective. In this case, all the three rebellions, all the three major resistance is 1902, because local rulers, local elite, and local people lose power. They didn't want to be consolidated, of course, but what, like 2 out of 3, such as in the north and in the south, the rebellion led by local rulers because they want to retain their power, which was stripped by Bangkok. Only in the northeast is more like peasant rebellion against a centralized power. National language. This is the point I try to say, that people tend to overlook this point. I call it Russification. Now I think it may be easier to understand if I call it Thaiification. Force or implement the policy to make people speak the same language. And a moment ago, I add other things such as Buddhism too. Now, in terms of language, yes, not only positively try to convince is a kind of carrot policy, it's also a stick as well, such as what happened in the south in Patani today. For a long time, they try to force let's say they don't abolish the local dialects, but they try to interfere so much in the way the local daily life, way of life is happening. Try to insert the Central Thai language into local daily life. In other parts of the country, in small ways such as centralized education, play that role from the beginning. The way they implement Central Thai language, including punishment for local kids who do not speak Central Thai language. Typically, they don't mind people still keep local language as long as they also adopt Central Thai. Such as in school, you are forbidden to speak local dialects. You can speak it at home. In school, you're not. But that policy is not very harshly implemented. But let's say a kind encouraged local school to look at that issue. And in some cases, there are reports of so many cases of punishment, students who speak local dialects in school or in the class, until recently, a few decades ago, it still happened. But not as widespread as it used to be, because in the past generation, schools everywhere in Thailand tend to be able to make the kids speak Central Thai. So I would say that history overlooks this national language issue is very important.
Great, thank you. Achan, there was a question in the chat about the 2 books that you mentioned, one by Paul Chambers, but what was the second book that you mentioned?
Dr. Phuong Thong Pawakapan is in English. The second one, the title is Infiltrating Society something. There's a word infiltrate. That book got award from EuroSEA's, I think, the past year. No, that's not EuroSEA. That book got mentioned as an important book on foreign affairs by Columbia University.
Great. Okay, thank you. And I think we now have it in
Paul Chambers' book about military. I forgot the title, but different aspect of the military.
Praetorian Kingdom, A History of the Military Ascendants. We have it in the chat now. So anyone who wants to get that reference, it's also, you can look in the chat as well. Dr. Safril or Dr. Kai, Safril, why don't you go ahead if you have any comments about anything that came up in the first round of questions.
Yeah, there is question from Charles Ham. Thank you, Charles, for your question regarding the migration of Chinese diaspora to eastern part of Indonesia. So before answering that question, I would like to share with you that actually we can divide the Chinese migration in Indonesia into the three group. The first group is for trading and also economic activity, and the second one for teaching and also teaching in the many school at the time, and the last one is for the labor migration. So if we compare between the three groups, basically the most Chinese from mainland Chinese actually moving to the western part of Indonesia. So we cannot see the solid evidence regarding the migration of Chinese from mainland to western part of Indonesia. However, we can also divide the route by the Chinese from mainland into the two part. The first part is on the by land, and the second part for by sea. So for the trading, most of them are moving to Indonesia by sea road, and they visit so many harbor in Indonesia, and they promote for the economic relationship, and that's why in the past the relationship between Chinese and local people in Nusantara, the name of Indonesia at the time, is very very strong and very there was a very close relationship. And also we also compare from the uh, immigrant from Chinese that use the land road is contribute to the language in the land area on the very close to the ASEAN language, but from the sea they focusing on the Austronesian language. So most of the Chinese Indonesia inhabit in Java and Sumatra, and we don't have any data regarding the Chinese Indonesia in, for example, in Papua province, Papua Island, or Molucas Island. Also, because in the past, the struggle for independence of Indonesia actually in Java, and also this is also the fact until now that many people in Indonesia are residing in Java. There is 60% of all total population. And the second thing that I want to share with you regarding there's also question the role of the ethnic minority. As I mentioned in my presentation, basically in Indonesia has so many ethnic group, and the majority group is Java, and then Sundanese and Batak, and there is also minority group. So for ethnic Chinese group, basically it's not coming from the Indonesia or Nusantara archipelago, of course. However, they still have the contribution to Indonesian struggle, because at the time the call for independence, at the time there was connection, deep connection regarding the local people and also Chinese from mainland China. So there was emotional connection when many people from China, mainland China, already inhabit in Java Island or Indonesian land, Sumatra land for decades. So this emotion then inherited by the next generation. So that's why they feel that we must contribute to Indonesian nation building, and they're still having the contribution until now. So in the last election, there is increasing candidates from legislative and executive, and this is also the good news actually, that Indonesia basically open for the public, open the all groups to join the political contest. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And then Dr. Kai, any comments?
Yes. In regards to two or three of the questions here, which I can also share my opinion, is that in Myanmar, Burma, when we talk about ethnic nationalities, it's a bit you know complicated to call them whether they are minorities or not, because the ethnic nationalities has dominated more than 60% of the country, and also in terms of population, it's about around 40% of the population. So I prefer myself prefer to call them ethnic nationalities or indigenous peoples. So yes, the one of the first question about the relation between anti-communism and nation buildings, specifically for Burma. In the early period of independence in Myanmar in the 1940s, 50s, communists even play very important role in the nation buildings, because those top people believe that communism can unify the country, or communism or socialism, I would say, but those concept or philosophy rarely reach up to the hill region or the ethnic people. But when we talk about the role of ethnic nationalities in nation buildings, I think we also have our own cultural identities, and we also share much of our identities together with our, those who share the same identity with us. For example, the Shan, they also share much of their identity with their colleagues and their relatives in China. The Jingpo share much of their identity together with their Jingpo groups in India and China. The Thai Yai group also share much of their identity together with the northern Thailand. So many times when we talk about ethnic nationality identities, they live in those imagined communities. So it is a problem that, as I have mentioned, the imposition of a singular national identity centered around one religious group on one ethnic nationality would not or will not help the different or diverse ethnic groups in nation buildings. Maybe political scientists might know it better. State building would help, providing the needs of ethnic peoples and bringing them together, because the agenda, the proposal by General Aung San, the father of Aung San Suu Kyi, back in the 1940s, is coming together and share the ruling system in Burma. So this is one of the answer, but my last answer for the question by one of our Shan colleagues here is that nowadays the Burmese people also realize that, yeah, we have these common threats to fight. So we are in the point of win or die. So both sides, both the military or the ethnic armed groups or the other revolutionist groups, we are standing now in the position win or die. If the SAC win, all the endeavors made by the revolutionist group will cease. If the what they call the PDF or People Defense Force or the ethnic armed groups, if they win, and then there will be major restriction of the Tatmadaw, the military itself. So to be very brief, I think when we talk about nation buildings, we have different nationalities, and we have First Nations people, we have Aboriginal people, especially in Southeast Asia countries. So I don't think the imposition of a singular national identity will work in nation buildings, both in Thailand, Indonesia, or even in Burma. And how about the role of the military? How if I am not also sure for the answer, but I just want to raise a question. How if we apply systems such as Professor Safril will know more about this, the Dui Fong Si back in the 1950s, 60s in Indonesia, the military drawing back to the barrack, the military quarters, and give more chance to the the authentic politicians, not the soldiers, managing the country, so that we can build our nation or nation state better. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, all three of you. We have about 15 minutes left, and we've got a few questions. Some of you answered a few of those, but I'm going to lay those questions out, and then we can sort of wrap up. But Thongchai, go ahead.
May I join the question, answering the question of indigenous people?
Yes, please. Actually, that's great.
Actually, there is a question to me. Is indigenous people recognized in nation building? Yes and no in different way. I like this question because I like to test and answer that, leave the answer for the audience to think about. Have you ever thought about being an enemy help nation building? Indigenous people, upland people in Thailand, and also the Malay Muslim in the south, in Patani, has been regarded as a kind of trouble, enemy, or let's say threat to security of the nation. Because of that, it helps nation building in a way. Of course, you may question what kind of nation. Yes, I have that question too. Not only because of ethnic indigenous people, even the role of the monarchy, role of military, what kind of nation they build. Now, back to the issue. If we take the role of enemy, whether or not they are threat to nation building doesn't matter, but they are considered threat. So then that built up the role of the military, the role of, in Thailand, other elites, including the monarchy, and reinforced the ideology of sameness, ideology of royal nationalism, which is so important to nation building. So I think indigenous people, Malay Muslim people for a long time has been assigned that role. Whether or not they are really threat, that's another issue. Because of that, there is currently a weird phenomenon, which I don't have answer I'd like to pose. This as a question. Upland ethnic people want so much to become Thai citizens. They are largely denied or put a lot of obstacles to become citizens. They want, but they were obstructed. Patani people, a lot of them don't want to be Thai citizens. They are obstructed from living. Why? What kind of policy? They seem contradictory, right? I'm not going to answer. In fact, they may not be contradictory, but look at, apparently, they're contradictory. Those people who want to be Thai, they are obstructed. Those people who don't want to be Thai, they will prevent from living. So it means that that's the kind of legacy is how indigenous people has been recognized or negatively role in the recognition of nation building. That answer also go hand in hand with a question that come in, did anti-communism contribute to nation building? I think that's the answer. It contributes as a negative role.
Thank you, Thongchai. I think that's a fascinating kind of puzzle. You know, why is it that the people that want to get away are kind of being pulled in, and people that want to be away, right, are not? So, and I do think this language and understanding of sort of indigenous or Aboriginal is also kind of really interesting as well. You know, I think in the Indonesia presentation, you said the Chinese are considered indigenous, but in the language of, you know, indigeneity in the West, like the Chinese would not be considered indigenous; they would be considered migrant and national and ethnic communities and things like that. So maybe that's something we could also address. Let me go off and read the rest of the questions, and we'll just do a final quick round, maybe of just 3 or 4 minutes each. One question is about communism and the role that it played in nation building, and I think that's already been asked. Another question was about Islam in the Thai South, but I think that's a more general question that could be asked in other countries as well, the role of Islam and nation. There is a question about, let me see here in the Q&A about the role of, let's see here, I'm sorry, let me just look in the chat. The structure and system of the education system being centralized. And in that case, how is diversity being addressed in the public sphere, like in public spaces and things like that? And then there's a final question that's a little bit more about research. And it asks, you know, all of you in many ways are doing kind of different kinds of research, but research on the ground, such as field work, that really wants to illuminate politically sensitive issues that can complicate unification narratives. So what challenges do scholars have in trying to learn about these issues from an internal perspective? And what strategies do scholars have to try to kind of qualify these issues? So maybe something that's speaking especially to graduate students in the audience about doing research on the ground on these kinds of topics. So we have about 8 minutes left, so maybe 3 minutes each. We can start again with Thongchai, and then let's just go around. Any final comments?
For the question about Islam in southern Thailand, I would say it's part of what I have to talk about already. Thaiization and the emphasis on sameness, the same emphasis on Thainess is so, I mean, it alienates Muslim people. In a way, it may work or it may not lead to so much problems before the time that we now learn about multicultural, we learn about diversity. So they are suppressed for a long time, but now people learn more about diversity. A nation can be diverse. A nation doesn't have to be the same. So they are kind of hard to reconcile. The same, that answer also for the question about diversity, identity, that's why in many nation building, at least in Thailand, it becomes friction. You can hear the state say that they agree, they advocate both. On the one hand, Thainess or identity. On the other hand, they also like diversity. But so many times, the two are to become frictions. And they try to solve that. I think that's it. That's the push and pull that every nation, not just Thailand, but experience I have in Thailand, they try to negotiate. And thus far, so far, I think they are more like emphasize the sense of sameness. The question for research, following those questions, following those issues, I'm not sure I understand quite clearly, but I would say that think about it. Modern nations, the idea of nation state, normative nation state, normative ideas. I don't know what is normative, but let's say there is something more like, you can say Eurocentrism. I'm not even sure, but the idea is like a Andersonian nation, for example. It's not realized in most countries in Southeast Asia. Think about why. I'm not even sure the sense of equality that we might call citizens strongly rooted in Southeast Asia. I'm not even sure that the idea of nation state, which is secular, in Southeast Asia, are we all secular? I'm not even sure. Of course, that depends on the notion or different definitions of a nation we are talking about. But I'd like to throw those questions out. Like, so if we accept that those nations nations in Southeast Asia if we accept that no absolute correct definition of nation state, then everybody can have their own version. That's also acceptable ground. But then try to figure out what is particular characteristic, particular quality of things called nation in each country. Perhaps, for example, in Thailand, those friction or the weird question, the contradictory question I posed a moment ago, reflect the kind of characteristic of the Thai nation that maybe it sounds weird if we are in Europe. It sounds weird if we are in other countries. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Achan. Dr. Mubah.
Okay, I want to answer question about linguistic and cultural diversity. I will be quick. So Indonesia has 715 local language. So between the area, there is still connection. To make connection between all area, we use the national language. So this is already in the agreement, national agreement in Indonesia from 1928 to use the Bahasa Indonesia, Indonesian language. So actually, this is not a kind of the state or government reinforced to the local people to use national language, but this is for communication in many activities. Because of course, it will be very difficult for people from one area to another area to speak and also to communicate with their own local language. So the national language is used officially in the education, in the school, and also in work. But in the local village and also in the local relationship, the people still use their own local language. For example, I'm coming from Java Island, but in Java Island, actually there are around, I think, 5 or 6 local language, and this is divided into 3 or 4 or 5, I think, 5 ethnicity group in the Java Island. So when I speak with my, for example, my neighbor and also my friends in Surabaya, particularly I use the Javanese language because they already know about the Japanese language, right? However, if I go to, for example, West Java use Sudanese language. Of course, I cannot use Japanese language in East Java province in Bandung, for example. So we use national language. The example also, if I go to Kalimantan or Sumatra Island, we use national language to communicate each other. So this is a kind of unify all people in Indonesia by using the national language. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Kai, last words.
I myself learned a lot from Ajahn Thongchai and Professor Mubah. Thank you so much for all the pearls of your wisdom. For my final notes, I want to just point out 2 or 3 things. The first, I do agree with Ajahn Thongchai mentioning about the common enemy, which united the other diverse groups. And you know, it's one of the good pillars for the future nation buildings. And second, also adopted from Ajahn Thongchai, the geobody. Maybe we will have new approach for this geobody by having these common enemies. And second point for the public space and educational system, specifically talking about Burma. Yes, when we were in high school and college and universities in Burma, we were taught the Burmese culture, which is intertwined with Buddhism, and also all the heroes in the history are all Burmese. And yeah, we do have history. We also have the ethnic people. We also have heroes, and we have unique literatures and so on and so on. We are not given a chance to study our own history. So meaning that after decades, we thought, okay, they are our heroes. The Burmese, Bandula and Oratabarit, now they are our heroes. But, the educational system should provide the chance to study the genuine history, even about the history between Burma and Thailand. What I read inside Burma and what I read in the Central Library of Chula is totally different. So yeah, this is, we are told the history by someone who wrote it. They wrote the history. So the second point, the public space in Myanmar or Burma mostly are the Buddhist monastic schools or the church for the Christian. And those leaders in the church, they have promoted what they believe, not like, the common identity or so and so on. So I think this public space, when we talk about educational system, it's not only about the mainstream schools, but our public space like Buddhist monastic school or church or Sunday school also should teach us who we really are. They should tell us our authentic or genuine identity, and it will help a lot about nation buildings. For example, there is a tripartite approach in promoting and propagating Buddhism. It is called ethnic national development and ethnic nationalities and border area development. So the Ministry of Culture and Religious Affairs, Ministry of Border Affairs, and Ministry of Education, and the rich people in Burma have been helping together promoting Buddhism in the residential schools, Buddhist residential schools in the border area or the ethnic area in Myanmar, Burma. And then, every April during the water festival, they shake their head and claim that, oh, in this Christian state of Chin state, this much of youth become, Buddhist. So this is one of the approach. And I think, like Ajahn Thongchai has mentioned, whether our nation buildings are secure or not. At this moment, specifically for Myanmar, no, it is not. This is the promotion of one singular Buddhism and nationality, not by the majority of the people, but by those, successive authoritarians. And last, the pillars for nation building, in my opinion, is like we need to have a practical sovereignty. The major decision should be, designed and structured by all the stakeholders, the ethnic people, and we need effective institutions, not only the military, but, bringing all the different people together and have those secular institutions, not focusing too much on religion or one singular national identity. And yes, there's a point that we can do or work together for cultural match. Not talking too much about religious issue and other things, but there should be some common space that we can share. And why don't all the stakeholders start working together from that point? And Grand Coalition, I would say, might work both for Thailand or for Burma, Myanmar, or even for Indonesia. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We're just a little bit over time. I want to take a moment to really thank the organizers, including the graduate students who really did a lot of the legwork organizing this and worked in the background. Maybe you didn't see on camera. And we really hope to see you at the next event on October 2nd about labor relations in Southeast Asia. But in the meantime, thank you, all three of you, Achan Thongchai,
Thank you very much.
Dr. Mubah,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Kai, for all of your contributions. I think the discussion could continue on, but unfortunately, it's getting late for some, and we have to call it a day. But thank you, and I hope we can continue our relationships virtually, and have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.